This is Comparative Theories, and I'm Heather Monterfect, and I will be the teacher of this class. In this quarter, what we'll be doing is I'll be making a series of CD-ROMs for you to watch or tapes for you to listen to, and we will be using the Blackboard for discussion boards as well as for weekly online quizzes. And as you go through the syllabus, there will be a series of different papers and assignments and so forth, and we can go over that in a future tape if that would be helpful. Today what I want to talk about first is just the purpose of having theories. What's the importance of studying a variety of different theories of human behavior? So if we ask the question, why do we study theory? Why does theory matter? What difference is it, and who are the different theorists that we'll learn about? One of the different things, or different reasons, to study theorists is to learn about the complexity of human behavior. I can remember back when I was an undergraduate and taking classes on, specifically a class on learning theory, and the professor started back in the early 1900s with early theorists John B. Watson and Hull and Guthrie, and went through different theories of how it is that animals learn, and moved on, and I kept being very frustrated theory after theory as to why is it that we keep studying all these theorists, and the sort of closing of the theory is, but then it was discovered that that didn't really explain learning, and we went on to the next one. And I was about 19 or 20 at the time and thought, why don't they just teach us how we learn? Why do they teach us all the wrong theories instead of teaching us just the right one, and stop wasting all of this other academic time on theories that are outdated? Well, as I've come to learn, theories evolve. It's important to study the transition, and when we get to anything like learning of organisms or animals, or particularly human behavior, humans are incredibly complex organisms. And so historically we will start sort of back where most classes will begin with Sigmund Freud, and we will move up through the psychoanalysts and the psychodynamic theories. We will move into the humanistic theories, and we will move on to cognitive behavior theory and behavioral theories, reality therapy, and we'll end with feminist theory. So we'll take a whole historical progression over the course of the last century. And hopefully one of the things you'll come to appreciate is that no theory necessarily captures everything completely, but every theory captures a little bit of something. And there's not necessarily a theorist who's right and a theorist who's wrong. Some things will resonate with each of you much better. Other things some of you will listen to and it just doesn't make any sense, and this has nothing to do with your own personal worldview. So what I think you'll all come to appreciate is that human behavior is extremely complex. And through the last century, different people have looked at different components of it and have come up with different ways of explaining it, and that's part of the reason why we're interested in study theory. It also gives you a conceptual framework for understanding, which hopefully leads to tools. Since many of you probably taking this class are thinking of becoming social service providers or therapists, counselors, or something like that, it's really helpful to have a way of understanding why it is that humans behave as we do, that we think as we do, that we act as we do, where do our feelings come from. And theories offer us conceptual frameworks or understanding to make sense of human behavior. Different theorists offer very varied theories, and one of the things you'll gain an appreciation for is how varied we can be in terms of how we understand human behavior. Different theories will drive different tools or different ways of interacting with your clients. So that if you follow a psychodynamic approach, which the theory says that what you do early in childhood makes a big difference in terms of who you develop to be as an adult, then it certainly makes sense that as a practitioner, you would take some time and energy to spend time with your clients and talk about their childhood experiences, because this is foundational and this is pretty critical to who they are today. If, on the other hand, you're Bill Glasser, who is the founder of reality therapy / choice theory, who believes that really pretty much what counts is what you're thinking and doing and how you're acting today, and the past is past, then you're not going to take a lot of time looking at early foundations, parental relationships. You're going to focus on what the client is doing now, and is what they're doing meeting their needs, and is it working or isn't it working? So how you understand people leads to what it is that you will do in your office when you're working with an individual, when you're working with a couple, when you're working with a family, or when you're planning a community-wide intervention. Probably each of you who are watching this has sort of a theory of human behavior in your own personal life. My own experience says that by the time most of us are teenagers, and certainly young adults, if not older adults, we all have our own personal theory of human behavior. This class will offer you what some of the big shots in the field have said. So Freud had a theory which was well enough articulated. Aaron Beck had a theory which was well enough articulated. Carl Rogers had a theory which was well enough articulated that they published, and a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon, and they're famous theories. Heather von Refect may have a theory that kind of fits a bunch of these and all goes together. But we all, based on our own childhood experiences, based on our own living on planet Earth, have a theory of sort of what makes humans tick. And so some of you will resonate to some of these, and others of you will resonate to others. And one of the things I would like you to get out of this class is to kind of say, yeah, that one makes sense to me, and oh, that one is just a bunch of hogwash. I just don't really understand it. I don't see how any other people could say it was helpful, but I appreciate that they do. But personally, I think that this makes sense to me, and I'm really going to learn more about that. Another neat thing about this class is those of you who are starting the program can use it kind of as the smorgasbord appetizer option, and to choose from, as you go through our program, which specific little t classes you would be interested in taking, in that we offer 10-week studies in about half of the theories here. So if object relations therapy really makes sense to you, you can sign up for Lana's class. If cognitive behavioral sounds like that's the way I view the world, you can sign up for the CBT class. So it'll kind of help you pick and choose what makes sense to me and what do I want to learn more about, and then we can offer you some opportunities to learn more about that. Okay, so that's some of the why is it important to study theory. It also, as you're working with clients, there's a term which I use and which probably I did not coin. But those of you who are working in the field who haven't done a lot of studying of theory to date, it's likely that you already sit in an office with a client, or visit a client in their home, or go out for pizza or something like that and work with people, and you figure out what to do, and often, many times, you may be very helpful. Many people use what I call pragmatic eclecticism. If you don't know any theory, but you all have your own theory of what makes people work, and you're sitting with someone and they're telling you about a problem, you have your own life experience, your own knowledge, your own, classroom learning, your own readings that you pull on, and you say, well, it makes sense to me that if I offer this suggestion to this client, perhaps they could take it and their life would be a little bit better. So that's what we'll call pragmatic eclecticism. It's pragmatic in that it seems practical, it seems like it works. And it's eclectic because eclectic means you pick and choose a bunch of different things. Lots of students, when they take this class, will tell me that after taking the class, they realized what they were doing fit into all these theories. They just didn't have the knowledge base, or they didn't have the place to go and say, aha, that's a Gestalt approach, and wow, that comes from an existential perspective. So this will give you names and theorists and whole models to follow to help understand some of what you're doing, and hopefully make wiser choices. Because if a client comes in and 1 week you're going this way, and the next week you go that way, and the next week you go this way, and the next week you're going there, you and they can feel a little fuzzy and nebulous and confused. So hopefully by having some theories and a strong, firm basis, it'll make more sense, it'll be clearer, and it'll help with your work with clients. So anyway, that's another purpose of having a a strong kind of sense of understanding the concepts or the conceptual framework, how I understand this client's behavior, their feelings, their actions, and where it is that we're going. Most theories will end up focusing on sort of three areas of behavior or being. There's the area of cognition. Cognition is our thinking, it's our thoughts, it's what runs through our head. There's the area of feeling, emotion. This is how you're feeling, this is what is your mood. And there's the realm of behavior. This is your action, this is what you're doing. All the theories will take a look at what people are thinking, how people are feeling, and what people are doing. The difference is where people put their focus. So that if you follow a Carl Rogers approach, Rogers, and he's person-centered or client-centered or non-directed, depending on the title of Rogerian therapy, Rogers really puts the focus of his model on this idea of feeling or emotion. You take a look at clients' feelings and appreciate how they're feeling and use that to sort of drive their behavior and their thoughts. If you're Aaron Beck or Albert Ellis, who come from rational cognitive behavioral therapy for Beck and rational emotive therapy for Al Ellis, the focus is on cognition. It's on what people are thinking. It's on what we call self-talk. Self-talk is the kind of running internal dialogue that you have in your head. They believe that through changing the way people perceive the world, people look at things, people think about things, that will lead to changes in behavior and changes in feelings or emotion. And again, we'll get to all of this in future discussions. If you're a behavioral theorist, or to a certain extent a reality therapist, your focus is on behavior. It's on the doing component. So that behavioral theory will look at clients and will say, what are you doing? And is what you're doing perhaps leading you to have kind of kooky, quirky thoughts and perhaps negative feelings? If we can help clients learn things to do, which are more effective in their life, if you can learn new ways to communicate with your partner, if you can learn how to make friends, you may not be as lonely. If you can learn how to apply for a job, if someone is unemployed and they don't know very much about how to dress for a job, they don't know about how to collect applications, they don't know about how to conduct a job interview, the reason they're unemployed, maybe they don't have a skill base. A behaviorist might spend a lot of time teaching job-getting skills. The client might hence become employed. The focus is on behavior. The assumption is once your behavior is kind of working for you, that will bring about a change in cognition and a change in emotion. So all of these are seen as important to each of the different models, but where people focus on, and then often people will draw these sort of as a triangle where anyone can go here, but if you have sort of people's feelings, people's thoughts, and people's actions, anytime you impinge on any one of these three, it's going to change something in the mix. Now there are two other components which the models really don't address very much. And one of these is the spiritual component. Many theorists didn't really attend to the spirituality of clients, and some of that was just it wasn't necessarily in their realm. As you read through the text, you'll find as you study the different theorists that many of them actually had either come from the ministry or were children of pastors. So it's not like the theorists were unknowledgeable about religion or spirituality. But through the 1900s, that really wasn't where counseling and psychotherapy were seen as being. It was sort of the separation of therapy and spirituality. So part of the reason that spirituality isn't included is it was just kind of what's called the zeitgeist or the movement of the era. This is changing. In the last decade, there's been a lot more integration of spirituality into theories of human behavior, into counseling practices and so forth. Physiology or your biology, This has been seen, again, until very recently, as this is the realm of medical staff, this is what doctors do, this is what psychiatrists do. But with modern brain behavior research, we are learning that it's not, we have the mind here and we have the body here, and each of us will work on our separate components, but it's a very complex, well-knitted interaction which kind of circles on itself. And so now we're working much more closely in terms of doing research and in terms of working with medical staff to understand how biology and human behavior fit together. But when most of these theorists who will go overworked, these areas were sort of peripheral, even though they're becoming more central now. That'll be comparative theories, 2104 instead of 2004. Okay, two more things that I want to quickly go over. One is the distinction between counseling and therapy. Scharf covers this in the text. Counseling is seen as being something that people do with clients who come in. If you want to draw a distinction, and many people use these terms absolutely, completely overlapping. But if you want to draw a distinction between counseling and therapy, most people will see counseling as a client comes in and you help give the client tools. You give them ways to figure out their life better. So you work on communication skills, you work on relaxation skills, you work on helping them, parent their children better or something like that. You counsel them to sort of fill in gaps in their knowledge and experience base so that they can go out into the world and do better. Counseling works well with a lot of people, if you want to use that definition of it. Therapy is seen as being more helping to understand what's underlying people's sense of being stuck in their life. So it's more taking a look at the causes of behavior and the understanding of the roots of behavior and what leads people to make some of the unhealthy decisions or the decisions that lead them to getting into trouble. Now, my own personal experience has been that I have worked with numerous clients who will come in, and it looks to me as a practitioner that counseling would be very helpful, and so I'll help them develop communication skills, or I'll help them develop parenting skills or tools in whatever area it seems like, gosh, this parent really doesn't know what to do with their 2-year-old. Let's offer them some tools. Or a client who comes in very stressed out and you offer, give them some books to read on relaxation tools, you go over some relaxation exercises, you work on some self-talk, and they're coming in 5 weeks later and they're coming in 10 weeks later, and they have all these tools, and they're choosing not to use them. And they have excuses and they have reasons why they couldn't do their relaxation exercises, and the assertiveness that you went over for why people pull on all the needs of their life just weren't working. That's where sometimes having the skills in addition to counseling skills and doing some of the therapy stuff really can be quite beneficial, because that's then looking at the person, why is it? How can I help you to understand? And how can we live together to understand, once you got this stuff, what gets in the way of your being able to use it to make your life better? And that's kind of the distinction, if you read those terms as separate, the distinction that people will draw between what's counseling and what's therapy. Now, in reality, I will use the terms interchangeably. Many of the faculty here use the terms interchangeably, and a lot of books use the terms interchangeably. But because all texts on comparative theories will go over the distinction, we will go over that distinction in here as well. Okay, last thing I want to cover here sort of comes back to my original question or my original sort of conversation in class. Why is it that we need to study 10 different theories in this class, or why are there 500 or more theories of human behavior? Why can't you just teach us the right one? Well, if you're sort of moved on beyond appreciating that there is a right theory and a whole bunch of wrong theories, still it makes sense to say, well, what does the research say? Why don't I use the theoretical model which has the most data to support that it's effective? It certainly seems if I have a client who's depressed, I should use what the research says works for depression. If I have a client who's psychotic, what does the research say works for psychosis? Well, it would be nice if it were that simple. The fact of the matter is that there are so many variables that are so complicated when we look at different human behaviors to understanding what is most effective. So certainly there's more research out there that says that cognitive behavioral therapy is effective for depression than any other model. Some of the reason for that is CBT has a lot of people who do research, and other models don't have as many researchers. Does more people doing studies necessarily mean it's better? No, it just means they're trained in research. If you look at the factors that matter, there's what is the diagnosis, assuming that diagnosis is real and meaningful. There's what is the personality of the therapist. There's what is the theoretical orientation of the therapist. I guarantee you, if you think psychoanalysis is hogwash, you will not be nearly as good an analyst as a person who thinks that that is where truth lies. So there's the theoretical orientation of the therapist. There's so how do you fit your theoretical orientation with the diagnosis, with your personality, with the client's personality, with perhaps issues of religion and perhaps issues of ethnicity and culture, and you can see that the mix gets very complicated very quickly, and what works for men and what works for women, and what about 5-year-olds and how about 20-year-olds and what about 75-year-olds. To do all of those studies, looking at each of those individual factors is next to impossible to get really good answers. So there is research, and Scharf covers the research in each of the chapters in the text briefly at the end, sort of the general research findings. But you will not be able to just go to the internet and say what is the best approach to use with a client with trichotillomania, which is like people who pull out their hair compulsively, and find the absolutely true answer for all time. It just doesn't exist, and that's absolutely frustrating. But because it's such a complex interplay of personality and diagnosis and history and time and place and gender and culture and all that kind of stuff, you need to figure out what works for you, what seems to work for your client, and develop this process.